Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today into something called Acts of the Righteous.
Oh, interesting.
It's kind of like we always talk about being good people, right?
Mm.
But what does that actually look like day to day?
Yeah, like what are the concrete actions?
Exactly. And that's what we're going to explore using this chapter summary and analysis of Matthew chapter 6.
Oh, from the Bible.
Yep, from a website called MCS. And what's really cool about this chapter is it lays out like 5 specific actions.
5 specific actions. Okay, so it gets right down to it.
It does. And it's not about like trying to become righteous,
Yeah.
It's more like these actions are what naturally happen when you already are living a righteous life.
It's like they're the outcome, not the cause.
Exactly, like the fruit, not the root. Now, I know this chapter comes from the Bible, so there's definitely some deeper theological stuff in there,
Oh, yeah. fair enough.
especially about heavenly rewards and all that.
Right.
But for our deep dive today, we're going to really zero in on just those practical actions themselves.
Okay. Sounds good. So just the actions, no theology.
Well, we'll touch on the context a little bit, but we
Okay.
really want to focus on what can these actions teach us about how we live today.
I like that. Practical application.
Yeah.
So what's the first action?
Giving.
Giving. Seems pretty straightforward.
You'd think so, right? But oh boy, this chapter throws us a curveball right off the bat.
Oh, how so?
It contrasts the way those Pharisees, the religious leaders back then, used to give
Uh-huh.
very publicly, wanting everyone to see how holy they were.
Oh, yeah. I've heard about that. Like making a big show of it.
Exactly. But then it presents this totally different approach, giving so secretly.
Secretly.
Yeah, so secretly that your left hand doesn't know what your right hand is doing.
Whoa, that's an image.
Right. Imagine doing something good and not even you fully know you're doing it.
That's next level. So it's not about getting recognition at all.
Nope. Not a pat on the back, no social media shout outs, just pure helping someone else, no strings attached.
Wow. And it makes you think, doesn't it? Like those anonymous acts of kindness.
They probably have a bigger ripple effect than we realize.
Totally. Because
Yeah.
it's just pure good, no expectation of anything in return.
Right. So often giving is kind of transactional,
Yeah, you give to get something back.
Exactly. Whether it's recognition, tax breaks, or even just feeling good about yourself.
Makes sense.
But this chapter, it's like, whoa, hold on. Why are you really giving?
It forces you to get real with yourself.
Mm.
Deep stuff. What's the next action?
Well, it's one that's really closely tied to this idea of internal motivation, actually. Prayer.
Prayer. Okay, yeah, that's a big one. So how does this chapter approach prayer?
Well, again, there's this contrast. You've got the hypocrites praying loudly on street corners.
Yeah, putting on a show.
Exactly.
Ah.
But the ideal is to find a private space, just you and God, and connect deeply.
That makes sense. So it's not about performing for other people.
Nope. And get this, it even says to avoid babbling on and on in prayer.
Huh, interesting.
It's like true prayer isn't about impressing God with fancy words or a long list of requests.
More about that heartfelt connection.
Yes, you got it. Quiet, heartfelt, trusting that God already knows our needs.
I can see how that would lead to a different kind of prayer experience.
Definitely. And speaking of finding the right words, the chapter actually outlines a model for prayer.
A model, like a template.
Kinda. The source calls it the disciples' prayer. You might know it as the Lord's Prayer.
Oh, right.
But what's emphasized here is it's not meant to be just a rigid formula to repeat,
More like guidelines.
Yeah, more like guiding principles, pointing us to the essence of prayer.
I see. So what's the essence then?
Well, one thing that's striking is how outward focused it is.
Outward focus. In what way?
It's not all about asking for what we want. There's a focus on God's holiness, the coming of his kingdom, things like that.
So it's about aligning yourself with something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. Seeking God's will, not just our own desires. It's about surrendering our ego.
Wow. Surrendering the ego. That takes us right into the next act of the righteous, doesn't it?
You got it. Fasting.
Fasting. Ooh, that one always gets a bad rap.
I know, right? People think deprivation, punishment.
Exactly. But biblically, isn't it more about intentionally setting aside those physical comforts for a bit?
Yeah. To deepen your connection with God.
That's like creating space, mentally and physically.
To focus on something beyond the everyday material stuff. But here comes the challenge again.
Another challenge.
The chapter calls out those who make a big show of their fasting,
Like looking all miserable and drawing attention to themselves.
Yep. But true fasting, it says, is a private internal thing.
So it's about your inner state, not outward appearances.
Exactly. Which, makes you think, how much of our spirituality today
Yeah.
is really just about wanting external validation.
That's a good point. Like with social media and everything.
Right. We post about our workouts, our meditation, healthy meals, but are we doing it for us or for the likes?
It's easy to get caught up in that.
It is. So whether it's fasting or any spiritual practice, it's good to ask ourselves,
What are we really after?
exactly, the internal transformation or how it looks to other people. And that question leads us right into the next act of the righteous, which is, well, it might be the most intriguing one, storing up heavenly treasures.
Ooh. Now that sounds pretty abstract.
Right, it does. But when we see how the source breaks it down, it gets,
What? How do they explain it?
well, it actually gets pretty concrete and even, dare I say, a little radical.
Okay, now I'm really curious. Spill the beans. What are these heavenly treasures we're supposed to be storing up?
Well, the source connects it directly to spiritual wealth,
Spiritual wealth, okay.
but specifically focusing on leading others to know Jesus.
So it's not about, like, money or possessions.
Nope, not about that kind of wealth. It's about investing in, well, something with eternal significance,
Eternal significance. Helping others find faith.
Yeah, something like that. It's pretty wild when you think about it. Like, we spend so much of our lives chasing material success, right?
Oh, yeah. Security, comfort, that whole thing.
Exactly. But this chapter is like, hold on, those things are fleeting. What really matters is the stuff that lasts.
Love, connection, meaning.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe, just maybe, helping other people find that same sense of purpose through faith.
Like, that's the real investment.
The treasure that actually lasts. Wow, it really shifts your perspective.
It does, and it actually connects really well to the whole idea of trusting God, which is the final act of the righteous we'll look at.
Oh, that's a good point. We already talked about how trusting God helps overcome worry and anxiety, but how does that tie into heavenly treasures?
Well, imagine for a second you're like clinging to a handful of sand, right?
Yeah.
So focused on not letting it slip away that you miss everything else around you.
Okay, I can picture that.
That's kind of what it's like when we put all our trust in material things, We're so busy acquiring and protecting them, we lose sight of what truly matters.
We're so focused on building our sandcastle, we forget to enjoy the ocean.
Exactly. But when we loosen our grip a little, when we trust that we're held, that we're provided for,
Then what?
then our hands are open to receive something more.
Something more, like those heavenly treasures.
Maybe. Because when we trust God, we're admitting we're not actually in control.
Yeah.
Surrendering that need to grasp and strive and control everything.
Yeah, that's tough.
It is. But then a funny thing happens.
What's that?
We actually open up to experiencing true abundance. Not just material stuff, but purpose, connection, real joy.
It's like that saying, the more you try to control your life, the less you actually live it.
Exactly. It's a paradox.
So trusting God isn't passive then.
No way. It's about living in a way that reflects that trust, making choices aligned with your faith.
Even when it doesn't make logical sense.
Yeah, even then, because sometimes those choices lead to the greatest treasures.
I like that. But what if someone isn't coming from a Christian background?
Good question. That's what I find so fascinating about this whole acts of the righteous idea.
What do you mean?
They kind of resonate even outside of a religious context, don't they?
Yeah, I guess so. How come?
Because, at their heart, they're really about those universal values: generosity, compassion, integrity, trust. Everyone can get behind those.
So even if you don't believe in heaven, you can still see the value in investing in things that last.
Right. Relationships, service, making the world a better place. It's about who we are more than just what we do.
And we were talking earlier about the attitude behind the actions, remember?
Ah, yes. Because the chapter focuses on actions, but what about the underlying heart condition?
It makes you wonder, like, someone could be doing all the right things, but
Yeah.
if their heart isn't really in it, if it's all ego or self-interest, does it even matter?
Now that's a question to ponder. And that's actually a perfect segue into the final part of our deep dive.
That is a great question. We've been going through all these acts of the righteous, giving, prayer, fasting, that whole heavenly treasures idea. And it really makes you think, like, where does that shift come from?
It's true. Like, our source material is pretty clear that you don't earn righteousness. It's like you're already in the right spot, and then these actions flow out.
So from that viewpoint, righteousness comes from connecting with God, right? Right. But what if someone's not coming at it from that Christian angle? Can you still explain where the change comes from?
Oh, absolutely. Remember, we've been saying these are like universal values, right? Generosity, compassion, all that. Anyone can connect with that.
So even if you don't believe in God, you can still try to live by those good values.
Exactly. And maybe that's the real treasure here. Recognizing that those qualities aren't things you got to earn from outside yourself. They're already in you, like a little seed waiting to grow.
We're all born with the potential for goodness, but it takes work to make it bloom.
And that work can look like a lot of things. Prayer, meditation, helping others, or even just being more mindful in your everyday life.
It's not about some big dramatic change then.
Not necessarily. It's those little choices that add up. How you treat the cashier at the store. How you react when someone's rude to you. How you show up for your friends when they're down.
It's like those ordinary moments are actually chances to practice being kind.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the more it becomes part of who you are.
Like building a muscle. So eventually, doing good stuff isn't even an effort. It's just you being you.
That's the goal. And it brings us back to that question of the heart behind the actions, right? Like, you could do all the right things.
But if you're just faking it, does it count?
Yeah. Tough one. We can't see inside other people, right? We just see what they do.
So maybe it's not about judging other people then.
Right. Because the only person you can really control is you. That's where looking inward is so important. Asking yourself, why am I doing this? What's my real motivation here?
And if you're honest, you might find out it's not always so pure.
It can be kind of uncomfortable to face that.
It can, but also kind of freeing, right? Because then you can start making choices instead of just going through the motions. Exactly. The more you do that, the more your actions line up with what you believe. And you actually become that good person.
It's like you're peeling back all the fake stuff to let your true self shine through. And that light, it spreads outward, doesn't it?
It does. And maybe those are the heavenly treasures after all. Creating a world where love and trust and generosity are actually how we live, not just nice ideas.
So much to think about from this deep dive. Anonymous giving, aligning your actions and values.
It's about taking those ancient teachings and making them real in our lives today.
And that's what this show is all about. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully this sparks some ideas for how you can do those acts of the righteous in your own way.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.